Hello and good evening, and welcome to the 10 p.m. Wednesday show, which is running today at 11 p.m. And you must be wondering why. That is because we had to have Mr. Robert Spencer today on this show because of the topicality. And also, we have Ruchir Sharma, who would also talk about the international economic dimensions, which are being paraded as some kind of a defense to the entire Nupur Sharma episode, which I must say I found it quite sordid. I don't know how others will feel. And of course, Vibhuti Jha, as always, on the Wednesday 10 p.m. show, today 11 p.m. And here I am welcoming Mr. Robert Spencer and of course, Ruchir has just joined. So, and Vibhuti ji, welcome as always.
Thank you. Thank you.
And some people are asking on the chat why we are not speaking in Hindi. Let me tell you that Wednesday 10 p.m. show, today 11 p.m., is always an English show. So let's not worry about that too much. Uh, Robert, straight question to you.
Yes, sir.
You know all about the Nupur Sharma episode. You also tweeted about it. So, are the Hadith blasphemous?
That's an excellent question. That is the implication of what is happening now. And this anger and hysteria over what Nupur Sharma said is extraordinary. And I find it astonishing in light of the fact that she didn't say anything except what's in the Islamic texts. And so are the Muslims actually repudiating the Islamic texts? Of course they are not. What they're doing is trying to put non-Muslims on notice that we must never speak of these things at all, and that to do so is to invite difficulty and trouble unless we're speaking in a fulsomely positive, fawning manner. And failing that, nothing is acceptable, and everything will lead us to violence and riots and death threats and everything else.
Well, another question coming out of your response, Robert, is that there's a trend today saying that since the hadiths are very, very insulting to the Prophet, so why not ban them? After all, Saudi Arabia has already disowned them.
I don't think that that's quite accurate. I'm sorry to say. Saudi Arabia couldn't possibly disown the Hadith, and they could never be banned. In the first place, there are numerous exhortations within the Quran, notably in chapter 4, verse 80, but also many other passages that say that Muslims must obey Allah and the Messenger. Now, how can you obey the Messenger when there is no information about Muhammad in the Quran? The name is only given 4 times, Muhammad, in the Quran, whereas other people, Moses and Jesus and others, are mentioned many, many more times than that. And there is no biographical information given. So once Muhammad is dead, how can a pious Muslim obey the Messenger? You can't. You have to go to the Hadith to find out what he said and did and commanded. And so in the first place, the Hadith are not negotiable. Any serious Muslim would never say, we will ditch the Hadith and not pay any attention to them. There is a very small minority of Quran-only Muslims, or Quranists, as they are called, and they do reject the Hadith, but their position is incoherent because, as I noted, the Quran leads you to obedience to the Hadith. The problem is complicated by the fact that the Hadith contain numerous stories of Muhammad that even Muslims would say are inauthentic, and they would repudiate them as a result. And many times you'll find that in speaking with Muslims in debate. You'll quote a hadith and they'll say, oh, that's a weak hadith. Nobody believes that. Nobody pays any attention to that. And it's an easy dodge. But the reality is that there is a whole science of grading the hadith in Islamic tradition, and the ones that are considered to be strong or reliable, sahih, they are not negotiable. They are formative for Islamic law. What Nupur Sharma was referring to was Muhammad's child marriage. And that is abundantly attested in Sahih Hadith. Consequently, there is no discussion about it. It only becomes controversial when non-Muslims notice it. And then Muslims don't want to be in the position in India or in the United States or in Europe or elsewhere, anywhere they're non-Muslims. They don't want to be in the position of looking like they're endorsing pedophilia, the rape of children, and so on. And consequently, you get episodes of this kind. But within the Muslim community, there's no discussion about this. There's no debate about this. In Afghanistan, for example, when the Taliban was first toppled in 2003, the aid workers went into the refugee camps and they found that half the girls of second grade age were already married, and all the girls of third grade age and up were married, all of them. So we're talking about 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds, 10-year-olds. And that's because of Muhammad's example. So no one in Afghanistan is walking around saying, this is blasphemous, this is evil, you can't say this. It's taken for granted.
Quite right. So that's quite an anomalous situation. It's such an anomaly that, okay, that this is supposed to be a venerable example, and also at the same time, they feel pretty mighty guilty about it, especially the educated lot. So now we come to the other dimension, and that is the defense that the Indian ruling party or the government is trotting out for succumbing to the puny Qatar. And there I have Ruchir Sharma, and there are some conspiracy theories going around. There's some statistics being bandied about. So, without much ado, let me try and pick Ruchir's mind. What does he think?
So around this, as you mentioned, Sanjay, there have been a number of explanations put forth, unofficially, of course, about why the government of India, why the Ministry of External Affairs, why the party leadership itself have responded the way they did. That for about 10 days, there was strategic silence. And then all of a sudden, there was this notice given out that Nupur Sharma is no longer a party spokesperson. Her membership has been suspended. And the same day, there was also the first of many summons that came to Indian ambassadors within West Asia and the broader member states of the OIC. Now, the first of those, and hence the most prominent, was from Qatar. That this was particularly damaging because it happened during a state visit of the Vice President of India to Doha, while he was in meetings with Qatari dignitaries. The Indian ambassador was pulled in, and they demanded punishment for the actions of this party official. Now, this led to many people to believe that the response of the Indian government and of the BJP was a reaction to this criticism from the Gulf. And the Qataris started it, and soon every other country that wanted to establish its credentials as guardians of Islam, so Iran, then Saudi Arabia, and then others, including, I think, Malaysia, began doing the same, summoning our Indian ambassadors to these countries. So that led many people to thump their chest, like, oh, see the power of our ummah. The guardians came and saved us. They've stood up for what's right, and they twisted the arms of the government to act this way. Now, that's an interesting way to view it, but perhaps not the full picture, because it happened too quickly and too conveniently for it to have been an organic response to this sort of pressure. At some point, it was the status consciousness and reputation management of the Indian government and of the ruling party themselves that showed itself in them attempting damage control in this way. Now, unfortunately, the way it panned out makes them look weak, makes them look like they surrendered. And then you had the next round of people explaining, oh, it's because we can't jeopardize our relations with West Asian countries, with countries in the Gulf, because of our trade, because of oil and gas supplies, because of our Indian migrant workers who are kept as essentially hostages by another name. We have to look after their well-being, and that means we have no cards to play. But that's quite bizarre because the trade is not charity. It's not that they're gifting us oil and gas. We pay for it. And if we didn't pay for it, then it would be, the onus would be on them to find a new customer. So there is power for us. There is leverage you have as a customer. And also there are many countries that have a diaspora of not just highly educated people, but of working class people. There's millions of Turks in Germany. But that doesn't mean Germany has leverage over Turkey. In fact, it's the other way around. It means Erdogan has leverage over Germany and has leverage over all of NATO, in fact, saying that I won't let Sweden and Finland into NATO unless they take care of anti-Turkish activists, by which he means Kurdish activists. So it's not a unique position that India finds itself in, but the response was not befitting a country of the Vishwaguru status that India aspires to or thinks it's at.
Well, Vishwaguru has become a lot of joke, and I think there are many jokes floating around Vishwaguru. Vibhuti Ji, would you like to ask questions to Robert now?
The question to Robert would be a mutual sharing of thought and reaction, in the sense that we live in America here, and the blasphemy laws are becoming a problem in this country as well, because it definitely and directly collides with the famous freedom of speech, First Amendment rights in America. Because freedom of speech, Robert, is not about yapping away to glory in a park. The freedom of speech is about making inquiries, making distinctive information seeking, why something is the way it is and how it can change. People transform because you ask and make an inquiry. It's not a threat. But the problem with the Islamic ideology is, Robert, and I want your thought on it, how does the rest of the world confront it? Because they are using the democratic rights to impose their will on us. And it's open. It's no longer a secret. Whereas we are not able to play the game better. And I always say this is my favorite quote as a sportsman. When you are in the field, you got to play better than your opponent to win the game. Are we playing the game better? That's the point. And how do we do that? Particularly when we knowing what we know is that they are exploiting our rules against us.
Yes, but only insofar as we allow them to. And that would be how we could play the game better, is to stop allowing it. For example, you're talking about people who see the world in terms of strength and weakness. This is essentially the primary way that Islamists understand the world. And so when the BJP says we're suspending Nupur Sharma, they're projecting weakness to a group that believes that that is an opportunity for them. And so the way to confront this and this challenge is to project strength. And instead for the party to have said that she was right, that she was accurately conveying what is in Islamic tradition, that they are going to defend her, that would have sent a signal of strength that would have been respected, actually, by the parties that they're trying to appease now. And, you speak about the freedom of speech, and the freedom of speech is almost a dead letter. It's on its way out, not just in Europe, but in the United States as well. Just recently, there was an episode that, well, it began actually with Barack Obama, the former president, and Hillary Clinton, the former presidential candidate, Secretary of State. She and Obama both, in separate addresses, denounced the freedom of speech and said that there was so much misinformation and disinformation online that we have to have more government controls to fight it. And then just days later, it was announced that the Department of Homeland Security, which is supposed to be fighting terrorists, was establishing what it called a disinformation governance board to fight against so-called disinformation. Now, the fact that this was under the auspices of DHS was very concerning because it showed that the people spreading the alleged disinformation would be treated as terrorists. Now, there was an outcry on freedom of speech grounds, and now the Disinformation Governance Board has been paused, they say, not abolished. They haven't given it all up, but it's on pause until we're looking the other way. The point is that there are efforts to curb the freedom of speech everywhere. And what's happened actually in India over the last few days is all in line with that ultimately it will be illegal there. It will be a matter of criminal charge. Well, we're already seeing it actually with all the complaints filed against Nupur Sharma. It's a criminal offense to offend Islam. And in Jammu and Kashmir, there were three people arrested for saying they stood with her on Facebook. And so it's the same thing there that's happening in the United States, that ultimately this kind of speech, even if it's accurate and true, because it's critical, will be criminalized and silenced as a result.
I mean, you are absolutely on the money, because the freedom of press, freedom of speech is under threat. And that's the question. If you criticize my faith the way I do my Murti Puja and the way I believe in my God, and if you get away with it, and we do nothing about them quoting their own hadiths, so for that matter, how justified is that? And that brings me to Ruchir. And Ruchir, my inquiry with you would be that given the ties, like for example, Qatar is notorious for its acts. Qatar is notorious for having a major split with the GCC countries in which they snapped relationship for whatever they were doing. So, is Nupur Sharma incident that important to belittle every other tie-up on security, energy, investments and joint projects to have derailed in that fashion? Was India overreacting? We Indians are very bizarre. Either we become Digambars, totally non-involved, or we become emotionally so involved that we cry all the time. This is what my problem is with the Hindu reaction to the Indian government reaction. They panicked, put over importance to the whole thing. And as a result of which, then everything looks bizarre. Your thoughts on this, Ruchir?
It was very interesting to see this pattern, especially because, as you mentioned, so Qatar had a big falling out with the other countries of the Gulf, and in recent memory, not 10, 20 years ago, in the last 5 years.
Yes.
And over these years, India has also grown closer to Qatar's rivals, to Saudi Arabia, to the United Arab Emirates. And essentially, within the Islamic world, there are currently three blocks. There's the Wahhabi bloc under the leadership of Saudi Arabia. There's the Muslim Brotherhood bloc with Qatar, with Turkey and Malaysia. And then you have the Iranian bloc. Now, each of these countries, each of these blocs, they have their own methods. They have their own man dogs and attack dogs. They have their own lobbyists in DC, in Washington, DC. And each of them uses their power in different ways to establish themselves as the guardians of Islam, as the leaders of the region. Now, in the last 8 years, India has had quite, in public, a successful West Asian diplomacy strategy where we've fostered ties with Saudi Arabia and with the United Arab Emirates, taken them to new heights. Both of them have grown closer in trade. We have free trade agreements coming into being with them. There was the first Hindu temple being consecrated in the Emirates. And all of this is meaningless when you allow their rival in the region, Qatar, to push you around. What was the point of all of this outreach? What was the point of becoming strategic partners with the Saudis and with the Emiratis if you can't even stand up to their rivals or lean on them to establish that that India is part of our new anti-Qatari, anti-Turkish bloc? People have talked about this, that instead of the Quad, there's what I call the pentagram: France, Egypt, Greece, Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, and India, countries that are opposed to the Qatari-Turkish axis. That it's meaningless if you still allow Qatar to push you around. It's meaningless if you allow Qatari agents and assets from the Muslim Brother Network, from Qatar and Turkey, and their local assets like Rana.io and her associated acts, to push you around with zero consequences. So I find it very bizarre that we've aligned ourselves with one of the three blocs within the Islamic world. We turned our backs to the Iranians, who we had a long relationship with, to cultivate this relationship with Saudi Arabia and with the Emirates. And then it's meaningless when the tiniest of these countries, when Qatar pushes you around, or Turkey, which is going through an economic crisis, pushes you around. What was the point of defanging Pakistan if you created 3 new Pakistans in Turkey, Qatar, and Malaysia?
You are mute, Sanjay.
Oh, yeah, very good point, mate. Just a supplementary to this. What is this Adani angle, the Qatari wealth, sovereign wealth fund, and the Adani connection? That is pretty much on the social media today. It's kind of flared up today. Any idea about it?
No, I'm not familiar with that. I just heard some, people on social media saying that that there's a big investment from Qatar into Adani oil and gas, but beyond that, I don't know the details of it or how deep that goes. Similarly, some have said that political parties in India are financed by Qatar in order to keep all sides happy and to maintain good relationships. That Qatar is quite a clever operator, that when they were cut off by the Saudi-led alliance, they managed to survive and thrive through the strength of their lobbying, through the strength of their money and willingness to spend it, through their soft power, so to speak, to the extent that this is what real soft power is. It's not our yoga and blue jeans or cricket, but rather when your influence causes other countries to act in your interest without you needing to use your hard power. And that's what we've seen. And unfortunately, India is just an open access country which allows everyone to come and treat us as some sort of great game, like in the past, Iran in the first half of the 20th century, or Afghanistan. It's where big powers come to play their influence politics and use us as chess pieces. And great powers, minor powers, Qatar and Saudi.
All right. Okay. I'm back to Robert. Let's talk about this whole business of blasphemy politics. This blasphemy politics is actually completely irrational. And we've seen this in this Nupur Sharma episode. She said 3 things, all of them perfectly supported by the Islamic text. So it actually amounted to, as we just discussed, that it was actually a case of people taking offense to Islamic texts, actually. So where do we draw the line in this blasphemy business?
Well, I don't think any free country should have any blasphemy laws or any penalties for any kind of speech outside of direct calls for criminal activity or incitement to violence. And so there's no place for drawing the line for blasphemy should be drawing a line through blasphemy altogether. The very concept depends upon everyone in the country holding to the same points of view, and this you don't find prevailing even in Saudi Arabia or Somalia or Sudan or Iran. Consequently, there's no place for blasphemy laws nowadays. So we see how many people are persecuted all the time on a regular basis in Pakistan because of their blasphemy laws. So the problem in this case is that the Indian government is behaving as if India has these blasphemy laws, which to the best of my knowledge is not the case, and certainly should not be the case. After all, it's not even a Muslim country. Why should it be behaving as if it's adherent to Sharia? But there isn't any conceivable way that Nupur Sharma's statements were offensive except in light of Sharia. And even then, it's important to note that Sharia does not forbid non-Muslims to say falsehoods about Muhammad or Islam. The exact wording in Islamic law is that it is forbidden for non-Muslims to mention something impermissible about Allah or the Prophet or the Quran. And this is what's wrong with what she did. What she said was impermissible to say. It's not that anyone's saying that it's inaccurate, it's that she's not allowed to say it. In an analogous fashion, the rage over the Muhammad cartoons that had led to riots all over the world some years back is in direct contradiction to the fact that particularly in Shiite Islam, there's a long tradition of drawing Muhammad. And there are great artworks that depict Muhammad. It was never forbidden to draw Muhammad. It's only when non-Muslims start to draw Muhammad in a way that's critical, then suddenly it's not allowed. It's impermissible. The idea is always to enforce a state of submission for the non-Muslims, and that's the agenda here. And the BJP is playing right into it and submitting and accepting the parameters of the debate that are being set out by Qatar and by the other Islamic entities involved here.
Which is that authority which makes it impermissible?
Oh, that's a quote from Umdat as-Salik, Reliance of the Traveler, which is a manual of Islamic law endorsed by the Shafi'i school, which is one of the 4 major schools of Sunni jurisprudence. And you'll find actually the same idea in all the other schools of jurisprudence, including the Deobandis, that it is not permissible. There are certain things that must not be said by non-Muslims. It's not that nobody's saying they're lying or they're false. They're just not permitted to say. And obviously, the Nupur Sharma was not saying it's great that Muhammad married a child. It's wonderful. And failing that, to even note the fact is not permissible.
Okay, it's
maybe
something like the old 1 minute.
Yeah, sorry.
It's something like that old zimma that was imposed by Omar on the Christians when they first conquered Syria.
It's exactly like that. As a matter of fact, this is one of the rules of the zimma, that the non-Muslims, the contract of protection, so-called, is voided if they mention something impermissible about Muhammad or Islam or the Quran.
So congratulations, Vibhuti Ji. We are all zimmis now. Perfect.
Yes, that's the idea.
That was never in doubt.
That's true. We are all zimmis now, and as in one of the shows we talked about, Robert and I will be out of job. We can't talk about it anymore. That's the subject matter. But I have another question of geopolitics to inquire with you, Robert, and to Ruchir as well, and each one of us must chime in. What's the American role? There was a news item circulating yesterday that it is an American play that all of them have indulged in, because important, India has not been quite playing to the American tune of Biden and Blinken. And as a result of which, if you remember, Modi embraced MBS when he was under major threat of organizing a killing of Jamal Khashoggi. India embraced Putin, did not condemn the Ukraine part. India embraced Iranian oil when nobody was trying, US, and all these three entities were anathema to America. Do you think that it is potentially America is having a laugh, or like Blinken had made statements in India, to somewhere along the line, America ends up undermining a democracy of the size of India? Will it come to haunt America?
Yes. I think yes, certainly it will come to haunt America. Is Blinken trying to put pressure on India in this? I'm not aware of any statements that the American government has made. Maybe you are, but I wouldn't be in the least surprised, given the nature of the Biden administration, if Blinken or someone else were to denounce Nupur Sharma and say that this is a terrible thing that has happened, because the Biden administration pursues relentlessly a policy of appeasement to Iran and to the Muslim Brotherhood entities within the United States. And so the Muslim Brotherhood entities within the United States, of course, are strongly tied to Qatar. And that takes us back to everything that Ruchir was saying before about Qatar's role in this. And so do I think that the Americans will likely kowtow to Qatar? Yes, I think that's very likely.
Ruchir?
I would say that Qatar doesn't need any encouragement to do this. They would do it anyway because they want to fashion themselves as the leaders of the region, and because number two always tries harder, right? The second best always tries harder. They're the revisionist power in the region that are trying to take over from the Saudis and the Iranians. So, of course, they were first to fall over themselves to condemn it. But you should also keep in mind that nothing in Qatar happens without the blessings of the US and the UK, both of which are countries that maintain attack dogs to do that dirty work for them when it's domestically unacceptable or unpopular for them to do it themselves. So, like you mentioned, it's unlikely that Blinken himself would condemn this because he has nothing to gain. His party has very little to gain as well. So if they wanted to, then they would use one of their proxies in this manner. But then again, it was not just US-aligned countries that were condemning it. It was also Iran, who are quite antagonistic towards the US. And it was also countries that we are supposedly on better terms with as well. And I like what Robert said earlier, that strength respects strength, power respects power. There was a great example of that recently. People were sharing it on Twitter that in the 1930s, so 1937, Benito Mussolini, the dictator of Italy, was presented with something called the Saif al-Islam, the sword of Islam, and he was declared the protector of Islam because he was occupying, Italy was occupying parts of North Africa, Tripolitania at that point. And that's a great example. Perhaps I can share it here. Do you see this?
And the treatment of the Uyghurs.
Yes, exactly. And another is the treatment of the Uyghurs. So this is Mussolini with the Saif al-Islam. And it was given to him by a local Muslim who supported Italian occupation. And that's an example of how power respects power, strength respects strength.
Have you shared it?
Oh, did it not work? Let me try again.
You share your screen.
Yes, I'm trying to share my screen. Let's see. Here we are. So do you see this?
Yes.
Yeah, so this is Mussolini on his horse, holding the Saif al-Islam that was presented to him when he was declared a protector of Islam, thanks to Italy's colonial adventures in North Africa. So that's a very interesting tidbit of history. And then you mentioned the other one, that with China, or apart from China, even with Central Asian countries, with the Stans, who crack down heavily on political Islam and Islamist separatism and Islamist nationalism, you don't see criticism of their methods because their methods are effective, and in fact, their methods are endorsed. It's very interesting to see that in Muslim majority countries, a lot of behaviors, a lot of practices, a lot of so-called traditions, a lot of ideologies that are encouraged and state supported in India are actually banned in Muslim majority countries as being dangerous and subversive. The Tablighi Jamaat is banned, a banned organization in Saudi Arabia. The Muslim Brotherhood is banned in many countries. A very good example, beyond China and Xinjiang and the Uyghurs, is Central Asia. That the Stans, the countries like Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, they, during Soviet times, engaged in a massive de-radicalization of the theology and of the practice of Islam in these regions. And remember, this is where a lot of the invaders who came to India in medieval times originate, from Samarkand, from Bukhara, from Khiva. And it was quite a successful neutralization of a lot of the radicalism that had been fostered in that region. And even today, the successor states of the Soviet Union in the region, for example, Tajikistan, clamps down heavily on the politicization of Islam. They say Islam is a religion, it belongs in your home. They don't allow children to attend mosques to prevent them from being radicalized. You're not allowed to have a beard beyond a certain length because that's a sign that you are radicalized. The mosques are state controlled, and the state decides what scripture is acceptable and unacceptable, and have gone to great lengths to ensure that radical interpretations and ideologies have no place in their society and do not destabilize society or politics in these countries. If you like, I can share another video about that, a short clip about how Islam is practiced in Tajikistan, about headscarves, about beards, about children in mosques. But you can continue with your questions. I'll set that up.
Yeah, but just another supplement to that is that by that account, if you say that if you keep them under a tight leash and give them a hard time, then they give you a lot of respect, even present you with the sword of Islam. So right now, the pointer is that there are two people eminently qualified to receive Saif al-Islam in India too. That's Yogi Adityanath and Himanta Biswa Sharma. So I think they should be encouraged to present them with Saif al-Islam. And maybe it's only because of the prime minister that they're not going the whole hog, but otherwise they know exactly how to control this lot. What do you say, Robert? You're muted.
Still muted.
You're muted.
Oh, there we are. This is the same. It's always the same principle that they respect strength and they despise weakness. The Indian government is going to be in for a rude surprise if they think that in expelling these two from the party, that, well, suspending Nupur Sharma and expelling the gentleman, what's his name?
Naveen Jindal.
Anyway, that they're going to quiet the situation. On the contrary, they're only emboldening the jihadis within India because they see this government is weak and they're frightened and they're cowardly. Now is the time to act and to step up the jihad activity.
Right, Ruchir, you were sharing something. Yeah, Richard, you said you wanted to share a clip regarding the Central
Yes.
Asian de-radicalization.
Yep. Give me a sec. All right. Do you see this?
Yes.
And tell me if you can hear it.
Which brings us to religion. Faith-wise, the vast majority at about 98% of the country identifies as Muslim, mostly in the Sunni branch, Hanafi school of jurisprudence. The rest are mostly Christian, mostly Russian Orthodox. Now, it may be a Muslim majority country, however, here things are a little different from other quote-unquote Muslim nations.
So just to check, can you hear him?
Yeah,
we can hear. In fact, there's an echo.
Yeah.
I
We
think
can hear them. Try.
Okay, perhaps I need to
else
mute
so that it
myself. Do I need to mute myself?
I think that would be a good idea.
Yes,
All
yes,
right.
yes,
Let
yes.
me just try this again.
Majority, which brings us to religion. Faith-wise, the vast majority at about 98% of the country identifies as Muslim, mostly in the Sunni branch, Hanafi school of jurisprudence. The rest are mostly Christian, mostly Russian Orthodox. Now, it may be a Muslim majority country, however, here things are a little different from other quote-unquote Muslim nations. And besides the fact that you'll probably see people drinking alcohol and eating pork products, the government also has imposed a lot of laws that they claim maintain tradition over non-traditional practices. Basically, even though the country is categorically secular and allows freedom of religion, the government has heavy involvement in anything religion-based, especially Islam. Their reasoning being, think of it, when you come from a culture that might sometimes clash with what many might consider Arab-centric customs that dominate much of the Muslim world, you're probably going to get a country like Tajikistan. For example, the government has a list of pre-approved topics for imams to preach on in mosques. Attendance to mosques and religious matters are banned for children under 18 unless they express interest. The Hajj, or pilgrimage to Mecca, is banned for anyone under 35. Hijabs, let alone burqas or any other Islamic clothing, are banned for women. If they want to dress modestly, they usually wear like a hairscarf. And men are not allowed to have thick beards, as they are usually affiliated with extremism. Even Arab Islamic names were considered to be banned, even though the president kind of has one himself. Shut up. Their rationale behind this, it's kind of like this. Look, Iran, Afghanistan, I don't care if we practically speak the same language. I am not getting lumped into all the drama that you got into in the past few decades.
Who do you think you are? You're calling me dramatic? You literally had a civil war.
And I have more real Tajiks in my country than you do. Yeah, it gets a little complicated when they get their cousins involved.
And their entire world is full of cousins. Now, there you have a problem.
I think that's an interesting topic. Of course, now I think it's an interesting topic. We can have Robert on the cousin marriages. Where does that come from?
That comes from the tribal affiliations, that you don't trust anybody outside your group, and you're at perpetual war essentially with everyone else in the world. And so the only people you can safely marry are within your family. You hate everyone else. You're at war with everyone else. It comes from having a doctrine of violence at the core of your religion. But this video is fascinating because it shows that the government there is working specifically to restrict the power of political Islam and to ensure that it cannot spread there. And so that is something that is respected by the Islamic authorities. And you don't ever hear about jihad activity in the stands, the former Soviet republics in Central Asia. When was the last time you heard about jihad attacks in Kazakhstan or Tajikistan or Uzbekistan or Kyrgyzstan? These are not jihadi hotbeds. And they're not jihadi hotbeds precisely because of government policies of this kind. And if the other governments in the world, including India, were to stand up in the same way and say, we're going to take active restrictions, you're perfectly free to practice Islam, but you're not free to practice subversion of the government or attempt to bring Sharia here or to subjugate non-Muslims under the hegemony of Islamic law, and we're going to take steps to ensure that that doesn't happen, then a great deal of the problem of jihad in all non-Muslim countries would go away. And these countries are testimony to that fact.
Yeah, quite right. Actually, if the Constitution of India provides for that. Robert, I'll read it for you. I don't know whether you have read it. It's Article 25. The Constitution of India says freedom of conscience and free profession, practice, and propagation of religion. And this it's subsection 1 says subject to public order, morality, and health, and to the other provisions of this part, that is the part which contains the fundamental rights. So it actually makes the freedom of conscience and religion a secondary right. And not merely that, its subsection 2 goes on to say that nothing in this article shall affect the operation of any existing law or prevent the state from making any law regulating or restricting any economic, financial, political, or other secular activity which may be associated with religious practice. And B, also providing for social welfare and reform. And of course, there's a bit thrown about the Hindu temples, but this actually covers the entire arena of what is called political Islam. And every bit of it can be covered and restricted and regulated by enacting laws by the state, but the state doesn't. So it's actually a matter of willpower, the political will.
Yes, it's our weakness that we've allowed subversive ideologies and interpretations of religions that are not allowed in other countries to flourish with state support and patronage in India. To the extent that in Tajikistan, if you are a hardcore extremist, you're actually ostracized from society. You know, women make fun of people who are part of the Tablighi Jamaat over there, saying that they couldn't get married, and then they turn bitter and they grow a big beard. And what do? They go to India. They go to India because there's a flourishing ecosystem of seminaries that will validate their beliefs, that will give them training. If you remember, at the beginning of the corona pandemic, the first wave in India, there was this super spreader event hosted by Maulana Saad in Delhi that was full of Tablighi Jamaat members. Where did they come from? They came from the Stans. They came from Central Asia because what they wanted to practice is illegal in their countries. And India's, not just today, traditionally has been a hotbed for the most radical interpretations of Islam. There's many reasons for that, but much of what you see today, Wahhabism in Saudi Arabia was born in India, was born in UP. Ayatollah Khomeini, his ancestors came from UP. You have Deobandis and Barelvis. You have Tablighis. Because India is in a unique situation where the believers are outnumbered by infidels, that leads to feelings of shame and inferiority, and is expressed through a purification of the ideology and of the theology, wherein West UP has traditionally been fertile ground for extremist interpretations of Islam, and remains a hub. This is where you come to get radicalized, because no government in India is able or willing to understand, let alone tackle the implications of this. That Pakistan was born out of these ideologies, and you still have Jinnah's portrait at Aligarh Muslim University.
Oh,
And does anyone have
our prime minister actually? Our prime minister actually, in one of the functions in AMU, I think to commemorate one of its anniversaries or something, he said that AMU was the epicenter of India's freedom movement. And to that, I commented, yes, it was an epicenter for a freedom movement, but not of India, but of Pakistan.
Yes.
So for a prime minister to harbor that kind of a thought even, I think even Nehru didn't say that. Even Nehru went to AMU and said that you guys created Pakistan. So on that point, I think we're already at 50 minutes mark. So I think we need to take questions from the audience. Vibhuti Ji, can you start with the audience questions?
Sure. Mahantesh Hosmat, thank you, sir. Just watched former Indian ambassadors to UAE interview to Strat News Global. Just shocked how ill-informed he is. Unfortunately, we haven't watched it, so I will not ask if, unless and until Ruchir or Robert have seen it, any comment on that. Now, thank you.
I haven't seen that, unfortunately.
SP, thank you, SP. Ram sirs to Robert. Have you seen Lady of Heaven? Sunnis are stopping the movie in the UK. Was Abu Bakr and Aisha black? Will there be a Sunni-Shia war? Robert?
I have not seen it. I'd like to see it now that it's been banned. That made it interesting, but
good publicity for it. Yeah. I will also see it now.
But here you have the same situation. The British, what was it, Cineworld, the British cinema chain, announced that they were not going to show the film anymore. And the Muslims who are protesting out in front of the cinema in one place are screaming Allahu Akbar. And they see this as a victory, that it only reinforces that when they make threats and protest, then they get what they want. And so it was just the wrong signal to send, but it's what every authority in the world seems to think will pacify the situation. Will there be a Sunni-Shia war? There's been a Sunni-Shia war for 1,400 years, and it's not going to stop anytime soon.
So much for the
yes,
Thank you.
That problem of succession will remain unresolved forever. Yeah. And I have also seen the Shias, they routinely make fun of Hazrat Aisha. I mean, it's so I don't know why they are not called out for blasphemy.
Well, they're Shia.
They're called out for something else. Yes, for heresy.
Yes.
It's not blasphemy if you're part of the, then it's heresy.
Okay, fine distinctions. But anyway, the result is always the same. Yeah. Next question, please.
Earth. Thank you. This is not a religious issue, rather than it's a fifth generation war. India lags far behind than Chinese or Arabs. Chinese investing in Hollywood to show their culture, and Arabs in Al Jazeera and Brotherhood. Ruchir?
Yes, unfortunately, we haven't embraced the kind of strategic thinking we need as a regional power, or even as a fully sovereign state, let alone a civilization state, let alone a superpower. These are the dreams that we have, the goals that more and more people have expressed as being worthy goals of an independent India. It's very important for us to understand that it's not that you become rich and powerful first and then you magically get the tools of statecraft and the tools of soft power and hard power. No, becoming rich and powerful is a function of your power. You are only able to, and more importantly, allowed to rise, allowed to become wealthy, allowed to become prosperous, allowed to be stable if you have the ability and willingness to defend yourself. That the world is quite a cutthroat place. There's complete anarchy between nations. There's no actual, international law is completely socially constructed. There's no global policeman who will come and enforce it, except maybe a couple of superpowers who enforce it when it's useful to them in their own interest. But even they don't talk about international law anymore. They talk about the rules-based international order. Now, in this scenario, it's not a choice, it's a compulsion. You have to learn how to play the game. You have to learn what it takes to fight an information war, to fight a conventional war, of course, but also how to not constantly be on the defensive or constantly reacting to what others are doing, to situations you find yourself in unexpectedly. You should be shaping scenarios constantly, proactively, towards your benefit. And in order to do that, you first need to have an understanding that this is what our country is about. This is what our state stands for. These are the goals we have for ourselves. So the next 10 years, 25 years, 50 years, 100 years, and this is the way that we're going to achieve it. When you have that roadmap clear in front of you, then making decisions, goal-based, results-based decisions, is a lot easier than simply worshipping an ideology, simply being non-aligned for the sake of optics, or simply saying things for the sake of having the mythical moral higher ground. There's no mythical or higher ground. There's no higher ground. There's no morality. There's no morality in international politics and geopolitics. There's no law. There's just interest. There's interest and power, and those who are too weak to embrace it.
Next question, please. Bharat Bhushanji, thank you. Hi, Robert. NRIs seem to cheer Modi wherever he goes, but seem disinterested or in disbelief of what is happening in India, and understand their responsibility to defend India. Are they misled to think all is well in India?
Mute it again, sorry.
What's that? Oh, sorry.
You want me to read the again?
I don't really know what to say to that. Are they misled to think all is well in India? Well, anybody would be, but outside of India, this is not a matter of concern for anyone. I'm sorry to say, but this is just the situation in the world, is that the other powers are not acting in the interests of anyone but themselves. But I'm not sure this is exactly what the question is asking.
You know, the question is asking about if the role of NRIs in this part of the world, whether we are misled into believing all is well is in India because Modi is there. So, or is it that despite Modi being there, we are under a hallucination that all is well? That's what the question is written.
Well, I think should I attempt this
Robert, you're
answer?
muted again.
Yeah, I would say that Modi is certainly, that does give the impression to people that things are under control in India, and maybe this Nupur Sharma incident is a wake-up call to that the situation is not as rosy there as many might have assumed.
Actually, I'll add to this is because this signal of weakness has been going on for some time, and that is precisely what has encouraged these groups to up the ante, and that started with Shaheen Bagh, then it culminated into that 26th January incident where the Indian flag was desecrated on the Red Fort. Then after that, the siege of Delhi, and then of course the West Bengal violence against the BJP voters and supporters and their workers, and then the withdrawal of the farm laws. Everything has shown that the BJP, particularly Modi, because all of this has come from Modi, and also that you can add to that the situation, the post 370 situation, the backtracking on the gains of post 370. All this seems to have shown people that he has a one-dimensional solution to law and order problems, and that is appeasement. And that has encouraged all and sundry. And that's encouraged a lot of riffraff groups. That gives heart to a number of people, and that, in fact, sometimes undermines the effort of strong chief ministers like Yogi Adityanath and Himanta Biswa Sharma as well.
It's also that a lot of Indians look for a Chakravartin Samrat, a Caesar, to lead them. That India is a country that has prospered the most when it was centralized under one of these great men. And people, it's in the culture. It's in part of our civilizational ethos to have a great king who upholds his Rajdharm, who has a duty towards his subjects, towards his citizens, and likewise they have a duty towards him. Now, for years, Modi was vilified as some sort of monster, to the extent that it actually made him look cool. It made him look like the Caesar that people wanted, look like the Samrat, the Chakravartin that they wanted and they craved for so long. And I think there's a bit of a delay in this frustration when it comes to law and order or internal security, that of course it's more visible and more experienced for those who are within India. And it takes a while for that to filter to people abroad, to the diaspora. But it's indicative of this larger phenomenon that people want a strong leader and expect the strong leader to get his hands dirty, because it shouldn't be delegated to the common folk. It shouldn't be them having to sacrifice themselves in an asymmetrical war. It should be, that's the Raj Dharma. It's the duty of the ruler to protect us from threats to our personal security, from threats to our property, from threats to our traditions and what we call culture.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's go to next question, please. We have lots of questions, so let's keep the answer short. Manu Kapil. Thank you, Manu. Is Modi BJP living in La La Land? Do they think Islami will vote BJP? Sanjay ji, as we need alternative to BJP as Hindu party, why don't you start political party? So this question is directly to you, Sanjay ji.
Thank you very much. But I think I don't have age on my side, being on the wrong side of 60. So I can guide people who want to float political parties.
Sanjay
I can
ji,
play the role of Chanakya.
Sanjay ji, age is not a barrier. Biden is president at 80.
What a president. Good luck to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Reggie Pillay. As a counter for blasphemy politics, I think we should share what the clerics say. Instead of we commenting, enough ridiculous things they say is out there. What do you think? Robert?
I do that all the time. I translated Fatwa Alamgiri for that purpose.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, I'm all for that. That's actually one of the things that I also do at jihadwatch.org. It's very important that people know what the Muslim clerics say. Most people have no idea of the ridiculous and also incendiary and violent things, inciting things that they say all the time. And so you can see that at jihadwatch.org, among many other places.
You know, one of the things I would request the panel to share with me my thought on this is that instead of asking a question and accusing them that this is what your book is all about, why don't we ask the question, does this book say this? How will that approach work, making an inquiry, instead of asserting that this is what your book says? Just a very slight difference. But as the saying goes, the question matters. So why don't we shift the gear in terms of asking a question? As you did, Sanjay ji, you have translated the whole book. The question is that people need
Not
to...
the whole book, only one out of the 10 volumes.
Yes. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You translated the whole book.
But that's the more important one. It's got the book of jihad.
Right. Next question, please. Oneness. Good to see you after a long time, Oneness. Sanjay ji, there is a 9-year-old video of Akram Owaisi where he is seen making derogatory comments on Hindu gods and goddesses. Why is that not being used as a response?
Well, he was arrested for that, but then he has been acquitted by the trial court because the prosecution could not prove the authenticity of the video. Can you imagine that?
Right. Unbelievable. No, I believe in this part of it that, you have to demand, we have to demand reciprocity. Rest of the free world has to demand reciprocity. You can't insult my faith and kill me if I talk about your faith. Both ways, it can't operate that way. And that's what we need to become aware about and ask, demand. That's
yes, everybody should aim for the Safi Islam.
Yes, absolutely.
I like that idea quite a lot.
Thank you. Next question, VS. Thank you, VS. I'm already a Yogi supporter. What can I do to support him? Now, that is a question with Robert and Ruchir can't say. Sanjay ji, by default, it goes to you.
What more can you do? Well, I don't know what more we can do to support Yogi. I think continue with your support. That's all, and win more people over to your line of thinking.
Right. Thank
Build
you.
the narrative. Yeah.
Yeah. Next. Pratyush Anand, sir, when is your next Jaipur Lit Festival type event? Again, back to Sanjay ji again.
Well, we are planning it in October, but we're still kind of, wishy-washy because we now know after COVID that no offline event can match an online event anymore.
That's
So
right.
maybe a hybrid we can attempt.
Next. Oneness again. Sanjay ji. Oh, the question is repeated.
Repeated.
back to you.
This is repeated.
Jahangir Gotla. Thank you, Jahangir ji. It is basically about appeasement. Any appeaser should be mocked, booed, shamed, and ridiculed out of office. Robert, you are mute. You are mute again.
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yes, certainly.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. Absolutely. Appeasement is suicide, and any elected official who ever practices it should be voted out resoundingly. And I hope that that happens. Of course, we're always facing the dilemma that whoever comes in will be worse.
Next one, please. Thank you. Shninj. Should India go ahead and form Quad-like alliance against Islamists with countries like France, Greece, Israel? Ruchir?
Absolutely. Been in favor of this for a long time. Without the corrosive effects of an out-and-out alliance or strategic partnership with the US, which comes with lots of strings attached. Then you have to buy US military equipment. You have to cut off all your old friends. You have to really invest yourself into a whole ecosystem and thought process behind their strategic goals, which doesn't leave you much space for your goals, especially for a country like India, which hasn't established its goals. What are our goals? Do we want to see a free Tibet? We never bring that up. Do we want to retake Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir? It's not made clear. In the past, during Kargil, we treated the line of control as an international border, refused to send troops to cross it. What message does that send? So in that case, it's better to have a smaller forum with more autonomy, more strategic autonomy, through an alliance or a partnership with countries that are affected by, let's say, this Muslim Brotherhood axis of Qatar and Turkey. And so, yeah, that's France, Greece, Israel, Cyprus, Armenia. And if we are to make something out of this partnership we've made with the Saudis and the Emiratis, it should be with them as well. They have invested heavily in their conventional capabilities. And of course, there's the persistent rumor that Saudi Arabia is also a nuclear power, just they don't want to advertise it lest it lead to global condemnation and sanctions. So yeah, I would see much value in that.
Thank you. Thank you. Next question, please. Samir Mohapatra, Pranam. How can believers of Quran be incentivized to abandon a narrative frozen in time? If Islam prohibits them to engage intellect, how can we expect true dialogue or conversation to dispel avidya from their minds? I mean, absolutely great question. Sanjay ji, you want to take a shot at that?
I think that's up Robert Street.
Roberts Street. Okay, Roberts.
Well, the problem is I'm not a believer in dialogue or conversation precisely because the people who are on the Islamic side are not interested in any kind of genuine give and take, genuine discussion. They're only interested in dawah, in proselytizing. And so they're going. I've been engaging in dialogue and conversation with Muslims for 30 years, and it's always just either insults and abuse or lies. I haven't seen anyone who really sincerely wants to have an understanding with non-Muslims, because Islam demands submission from non-Muslims, not understanding, not concord, not harmony, coexistence, none of this. Submission only. And so what's the point of dialogue and conversation as from their perspective?
Yes,
I
we are all
totally agree with
zimmis
you.
after all.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, because that's the whole point. Where is the dialogue? Where is there no scope for dialogue? So it is only imposition of their wills. All right. Thank you. Next, please.
If I might just add, that
Please do.
you know the rules for radicals. So you have to treat it as some sort of rules for radicals so that
Yeah.
they try on you, and then you have to deal with it accordingly. That the way that you would deal with the rules for radicals.
That's
I
right.
think that's the approach that should be there.
Next question is for you, Sanjay ji. How I, as an Hindu, dissent when mocked? Mrigank Sharma is asking.
Mock back. Haven't you seen me on some of the news channels
Yes.
mocking them?
But then, as we've seen, it leads to disproportionate repercussions.
Oh,
So-
yeah.
No,
So-
that's because she wasn't mocking. She was shouting.
So I think
That's not the way to mock. That's not the way to mock. That we've learned enough, that there's so many ways. There are good ways to mock them.
Right.
For instance, I'll give you an example. They make routine fun of your Shivalingas as a phallus. So you can just tell them that, okay, that those who are rooted in the phallus will only see phallus and everything. So that goes very, very far. Anybody understands.
But one thing I would bring up, and
I have a beautiful way of saying it in Urdu. I said कि जिनका दिमाग खुशियों में हो उनको इसके अलावा कुछ दिखाई नहीं पड़ेगा. They will only see male organs. अब खुशियाँ आप लोग नहीं समझते हैं, मौलाना समझता है.
But if I might add something, that this mockery from the other side is a way of baiting people into saying something that will invite retaliation on them. If you look at the Dhimmi communities of Pakistan, for example, so that is called Gair Musalman, so non-Muslims. They don't say, though, I'm a Hindu. They don't say I'm a Christian. They just say, I'm Gair Musalman hai. I'm a non-Muslim. In schools, their classmates mock them in the attempt to cause a response.
No. The Pakistan is not the right example. So they have a Sharia law, some sort of
Yeah.
a Sharia law working there. That's not the right example. Let's talk about the free world.
All right. Then a better way would be to take great pride in your own culture to the extent that the mockery falls on deaf ears and loses its power.
I've
You only
just
give
been
them power
informed that
through reaction.
Vibhuti ji, I've just been informed that there are 19 more questions to go.
Yeah, that's why I
So
said,
we
that's
need
why I
to go really
requested
real
Ruchir,
fast.
let's kind of shorten our answer. Next question, please. Kumar Singh. Dear sir, what will make Indian politicians understand that their Muslim appeasement for power is path of division and disruption of India and peace? Robert, your advice on this.
What will make them understand is catastrophe. The only thing that will make them understand is negative results from what they've done.
They've seen partition and they haven't learned.
Yeah, yes. Thank you. Thank you. Very succinctly put. Next question, please. Alok Kulkarni, please make session on Spanish Reconquista, 721 AD to 1492 AD, long liberation war against radical jihad. In long run, Spanish Reconquista is bigger than victory of Tariq bin Izad. What do you say, Ruchir?
I'm not familiar fully with that period of history, but yeah, it would be quite instructive to learn about that. And also, my pet topic is the Balkans. So how Greece, Bulgaria, Serbia, Montenegro overthrew Ottoman rule.
Next question, please. Thank you. Raj, is Modi buying peace? If yes, then not seeing any preparation in bought time. Indefinite time. Modi grown old, give command to Maharaji ji. Sanjay ji, will you attempt that?
Well, I think the various reasons why Modi is kind of become dysfunctional on the law and order situation. We have been trying to encourage him to shed that diffidence But if that doesn't happen, then maybe the voters will get disillusioned enough to ask him to move over.
Thank you. Next, please. Abhay Tripathi. Thank you, Abhay. Why has France not come out to support Nupur's freedom of expression? Does the world not need to unite and stand firm before Muslim gang called OIC? Robert, go on.
It is very odd because just recently France under Macron was speaking very strongly about the need to combat this same kind of sentiment within France. But at the same time, they have a very large Muslim population that's rapidly growing in France. And so it may be the same appeasement agenda. Does the world not need to unite and stand firm? Certainly, yes. But I don't think the world knows that.
Yeah. And why would France come out to support Nupur when Indian government itself did not support Nupur? That would
They
be
did. Indian government did. Indian government did.
Did?
Yes, it did.
Oh, good. Then it's all right. Next question, please.
I was surprised actually.
Okay.
That's why I
Islamic.
remember it, because I was pleasantly surprised.
Okay, that makes me very happy. Islamic scholar pin your vid saying that Hindu and Christian are allying against Islam. One ex-Muslim said that Robert is a Hindu.
Wow.
Yes, you may be Sanatani, who knows?
Yeah, no, that you know why he said that? I can tell you that because
Yeah.
then he doesn't remain Ahle Kitab and he becomes what is called doubly criminalized.
Yes.
Next, Earth. Thank you, Earth. Will the democracy and secularism be death of Hindu civilization? We are taught by birth all are equal and whole world is one family, but the other party says kill the infidel. Two contradictory ideology. Robert, I would want you to take a shot at this.
That's absolutely right. They're contradictory. And the adherents of democracy and secularism refuse to acknowledge that contradiction. And ultimately, it's going to be impossible to avoid and ignore, because the people who believe that they need to subjugate or kill the infidel are going to continue to advance. And the more they advance, the more they will challenge the ideas of democracy and secularism. Ultimately, one has got to give, one or the other. There's no way that this can be avoided.
That's what I said in the beginning. That
if
we
I
have to
might
play
just
the
add
game
to this.
better. Yeah, please do, Sanjay ji. Yes.
Yes, I think there is some misunderstanding of the Sanatan position on this. Whatever is being said, Sarva Dharma Samabhava and Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, because we have a very fine distinction, and we have the what is called, we divide the psychology into 4 parts, unlike the 3 of the Western psychology, and this is from the Adhyatmic point of view, and that is from the spiritual point of view, and we make very fine contextual distinctions. This is being said from the spiritual point of view. This should not be mixed up in the regular behavior. And on that, I have done a lot of episodes, including the Hitopadesh story, where it actually makes fun of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Okay.
Right. Next question, please. Rahasya. Thank you, Rahasya. 60% oil, gas comes from Muslim countries. If this doesn't stop, we will always get bullied by tiny countries like Qatar. What can we do? Will USA sell cheap? What do you think, Ruchir? Short answer. You have to be reminded that.
Well, there are other countries that one can go to. Russia is the second largest oil producer in the world. You also have Brazil, which is in the top 10. You have countries like Mexico is an oil producer, Venezuela. We have to look at non-traditional sources, ones which would not blackmail us, but rather be grateful that we brought our business to them.
All right. Next question, please.
Yes, but customer is always the king, isn't it?
Yeah. I had heard somewhere along the line that India is gradually lowering the imports from Middle East and shifting to elsewhere. That's one of the reasons for constraints there. Next, Harshad Malve. Thank you, Harshadji. My take, highest civilian awards were Zimmi Award to Modi. Reality is that top leadership either is illiterate in Islam or arrogance of power of knowing everything? What do you think, Robert?
I think he's right. He's right. You can't argue with that. They're either illiterate in Islam. They either don't know anything about Islam, which is likely. In the United States, none of the leadership knows anything about Islam.
No.
And they're just dogmatically convinced that Islam is peaceful. And so in their arrogance of power and their ignorance, they're leading us all into danger.
Blind man leading everyone in the blind alley. That's wonderful. Thank you. Next question. Sanjay ji, can the acquittal of Owaisi be challenged with newer technology?
See, I'm quite sure that the acquittal will be challenged, but who is going to challenge it? The challenge is going to be by the government that he supports. So it's going to be perfunctory. I don't have much hope from it.
Next, please. Nirav Singh Parmar, why India isn't countering Pakistani HR propaganda?
I think we can pass it. Not today's topic.
Okay, let's pass
It's
it.
already covered by one of my previous answers.
Okay, Sharad Kumar HB. RS is preaching Islam. Listen to Mullah, Indresh Kumar's recent statement of Al-Qaeda. Your favorite topic, Sanjay ji? Go ahead.
Well, Indresh Kumar is heavily compromised. Ever since he got caught in that what is that Ajmer blast case. Ever since then, he thinks appeasement is the only thing, and so he's become Mullah Indresh Kumar. And so he can say anything, and not only about Al-Qaeda, but about everything. That maybe he can even say that Shivaji was actually Muhammad or something like that. I don't put it beyond him.
Wow. Okay. Harshad Malve next again. The only hope that I see is change in the top leadership. Just like Atal Advani era ended, we need to end Modi Shah era. New generation is less confused. Robert, would you like to take a shot at that? An external point of view.
I'm not really qualified to speak about Indian politics, but I always think that it's time for a change. It's never good to have any politicians anywhere stay in power indefinitely. You have in the United States, we now have this corrupt kleptocracy of octogenarians. Biden, Nancy Pelosi, Schumer, Dianne Feinstein. There's so many of them, and they're so very old, but they're just getting rich at the public trough, and they keep on going and bothering us, and they never go away. And this is not good for any republic or ex-republic or any polity of any kind.
Yeah, I was totally, I was totally shocked and laughed actually when Nancy Pelosi said she's going to contest the election for her children, for the children of America. I said, haven't you had enough? Anyway, next question, please. QWERTY, all these fake Arab royal bloodlines were set up by Lawrence of Arabia under British. This is your favorite topic, Ruchir.
Yes, well, yeah, a lot of these Gulf monarchies, or even beyond, let's say West Asian monarchies, are not, they haven't been in charge since time immemorial. They were installed, particularly after World War I, by the British. Once the Ottoman Empire collapsed and the Caliphate collapsed, they found malleable local leaders who they elevated to the rank of kings. This was true in Jordan, this was true in Iraq, it was true in Saudi Arabia, and then the Emirates run by Amirs. That's true.
All right. Next, please. Thank you. Rohan, my analysis is that US is not a trustworthy country. The whole aim of Quad is to make India, China fight and destroy each other. Putin knows how globalist forces murdered beautiful, honorable Tsar royal family. Robert?
Yeah, I think that's basically true. The US now is not trustworthy. If I were not in the United States, I would be advocating against any alliance with the United States as it is currently governed. I can't deny this. As far as the whole aim of the Quad being to make India and China fight, that's possible as well. There are very strange things going on all around the world. I mean, for example, the whole business with Ukraine and the president's son having business dealings in Ukraine, and so many others being so concerned about it, the president of Ukraine being tied up with the World Economic Forum. I think the story of what's happening now has not been fully told and may never be, but it's not what meets the eye.
I agree. Next question. Rohan again. Hindu community suffers from Prithviraj Chauhan syndrome. Khwaja Mohinuddin Chishti poisoned the lake waters which Chauhan army's animals drank, and he lost the war without even a fighting establishing Islamic rule in India. Sanjay ji?
Oh, well, I don't think that's historically just verifiable. So I think we'll pass that.
Pass for it. Next. Saurav Kulkarni, I bear witness that there is no Quran except the critical Quran, and Prophet Robert Spencer is author of Quran. No, indeed. Robert, how long will the Republicans like Rudy Giuliani become aware of the threat to US? Now, Robert, you can't escape the question. It's your favorite one.
No hope that American politicians are ever going to become aware of this problem. It's been 20 years since 9/11. Rudolph Giuliani was the mayor of New York on 9/11, and he still doesn't know about what the threat comes from or what the motivating ideology is. It's clear that there's willful ignorance involved, that people don't want to know what's happening and why.
Thank you. Next. Deepak Dubey, do you think it's high time to expose Islamic scriptures as Gulf has taken it to next level? We can take advantage of the situation and we can defame it around the world. Ruchir.
What would you gain by exposing? There's too much of this mentality of just, that it's enough to expose this, expose that. That's what the IT cell does on Twitter all day, exposing this rival, exposing that opposition member. Exposing isn't enough. Exposing is quite a weak strategy. What we should be is proactive. We should be pursuing our interest boldly and not being distracted by bait like this. Then you fall into the trap of others. We should be engaging on our own terms.
Thank you. Good idea. Next question, please. Tiger, Sanjay, you are a cute lion.
What's that supposed to mean?
It means a lot coming from a tiger, I guess. A tiger.
You have a big mane. KP. Gujju Fin interests sacrifice Nupur. Qatar and UAE are primary conduit offshore financial centers for Gujus. SD sir, North Indians have poor financial literacy. It's a very blanket statement. I do not know that. I do know.
I did stay in Gujarat for some time, so maybe I might know a little bit.
Sure, go ahead.
And then I am in Rajasthan, which is a bordering state and which is equally financially literate. The highest number of CAs come from Rajasthan, by the way.
Right.
So,
Yeah. Next question, please. Subramanya Nalige. How do we help the believers open their minds? Ruchir?
Who are the believers here?
He-
Are believers? They're believers. It's a loaded term.
Yeah, he doesn't want to be, but I think you know what he's talking about.
I have a strategy.
Right?
I have a strategy that I think that can work. There's a very, very strong ex-Muslim movement that is gaining ground. And I think all of us need to support that. That is one. And the second is from the Indian context. You really have to look at this asymmetry between the Ashraf and Pasmanda population. And all the cards are played by the Ashraf and they keep themselves secure. And the foot soldiers, the Pasmandas, they get the brunt of the reaction. So I think there are possibilities on that count.
Yeah, I mean the third part is demanding reciprocity is key to
that you will never get. That you can.
Yeah. But we have to keep continuing demanding. That's what I'm saying. Engaging in conversation. Next question is Sangram Kesri Ray. Should Nupur have given the Hadith reference as well, it would be in the face of hypocrisy. Did she? What do you think, Sanjay ji?
I think there could have been a better
Yes,
formulation,
yes,
but then when you are reacting to a direct insult,
yeah,
you can't always, you don't always know
yeah,
how
that's
you will react. Of course, had she been equipped with better knowledge of Urdu, a better knowledge of the scriptures,
that's
then
right.
maybe she might have phrased it better. Phrased
That's
it
right.
better. But then that doesn't take it away from the fact that whatever she was doing was absolutely correct.
Correct. Saurav Kulkarni, Narendra Modi and his party BJP are winning elections after elections, and jihad supporting party Congress is being wiped out. Thus, the leftist jihadis nexus doing everything to defame, pressure the government. Your views, Sanjay ji, Robert ji. I will first ask Robert ji.
I think that's very possible. There's no doubt that in the United States, there's often this kind of action where for example, this January 6th insurrection business is a fiction concocted in order to try to ultimately criminalize supporters of the former president and make sure that he cannot come back. And so it may be also in India that this whole thing with Nupur Sharma and all of it is coming from the opposition. I think that's entirely possible.
Possible. Sanjay ji, you want to add to this?
Yeah, can you just flash the question once again?
Yeah.
Winning election in jihad. Well, I just bring you the example of Lenin, how he became the person who actually got the power when he was not there even at the time of the revolution. He took advantage of the war, and he was actually a traitor. He would otherwise be considered a traitor. If Russia had won the war, he would have been considered a traitor.
Right.
So as a traitor, he worked abroad, and then after the Tsar had abdicated, okay, he could have continued the way the Syrian guys are continuing. He could have continued. But in the interest of the country, he abdicated. And then look what happened. After that, Lenin comes, the other group wins the election, but he still manages to get hold of power. This is what these people are trying. They're trying the Lenin method.
Or the Ayatollah method.
Or the Ayatollah method, yes.
That's right.
Closer,
Right.
much closer in time.
Next, Krishna. What intellectual depth does Modi show when he says, on one hand, with laptop and the other with Quran? Doesn't he know that this path
That's a terrible,
science and rationality?
terribly incendiary mix.
Yeah. Anybody wants to attempt this one, or is I think Sanjay ji has answered already. Next question, please. Humpty, doesn't this act of GOI give Islamic countries a leverage to interfere again? Once you get defensive, they whine even more. Robert has addressed this before. Weakness begets more weakness, and you get hammered. That's all that the strong do. Once you have shown weakness, then hammering has no end until you totally give in or revolt. The choice is yours. Next, Meena Hindu. Sarji, Rahul Gandhi, whenever he goes foreign, something happens in Bharat. Doesn't it considered as another toolkit too? Sanjay ji, you want to add to this one?
I think Ruchir knows better.
Okay, Ruchir, you go ahead.
Hey, there's an undeniable pattern that whenever he goes abroad, it has a revitalizing effect on international opinion. It leads to a flourishing cottage industry in especially English-speaking countries around various causes. It can be political Islam, so Islamism in India. It can be the Khalistani separatism. It can be the farmers' protest and anti-CAA. But I also think he goes abroad for other reasons as well, for familial reasons.
I will not guess on it. I'll leave it to the imagination of people. Okay. Vishnu has two-part questions, one for Robert, another one for Sanjay ji, perhaps. So question number one is, all these stone pelters, do you think there is a Dhela Sharif touch to the stones? And Robert, your question is, Robert, what happened to this week in jihad? So you start first.
This week in jihad will be back tonight.
All right.
Last week I was unfortunately committed elsewhere, but this week we'll be back.
Good. Thank you. Sanjay ji, you want to address the first one or just
Well, it's an inappropriate comparison because
Right.
the Dhela Sharif is used for istinja. That is the the purpose of wiping out your behind. So that is that is a holy Dhela Sharif. That is not used for brickbats. You must understand the difference.
Alok Kulkarni, next invention would be Erdogan's DNA is Mughal DNA is equal to Indian DNA, right?
Thankfully, Erdogan isn't actually a Turk by DNA. He's Georgian.
Right. Another thing, he changed the name from Turkey to Turkey. I think this is the time for India to change from India to Bharat.
Oh, Jambu Dweep.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, that's even better. Go
Yeah.
back in time.
That's right. Gaurav, great powers like West or China are never ignorant. Both have used their religious ideologies against other countries which are vulnerable. Robert?
I don't know if China's ignorant, but the West is ignorant. Look, I used to train FBI and military groups about the jihad ideology. I was fired in 2011 by the Obama administration, and every mention of Islam and jihad was removed from counterterror training. Now, is that justified by the realities? No, it's just willful ignorance and an attachment to politically correct fictions. And so the ignorance is something they've chosen and embraced.
Right. This is the thought that you said, Robert, was shared by another friend of mine yesterday, that President Obama was, the first pilgrim he made was to Egypt to apologize for everything. Everybody knows that. Sahil Chauhan, sir, is it possible that UN or Western world will ever recognize Hindus being the victim of radical Islam instead of believing that Muslims do not enjoy religious freedom in India? Sanjay ji?
Well, it is possible if we leverage our power better. If we at least if we get enough self-confidence to know that we have power. But if we always keep thinking ourselves as the poor of the world and have that poverty stuck in our mind, then we can never will. So we need
have
to leverage the power that we have.
Over the entire impression of appeasement. We have not yet got over that. We still continue to do.
May I add one word there as well?
Please.
The UN and the Western world is never going to recognize Hindus as being the victims of radical Islam, because the UN and the Western world does not acknowledge that there are any victims of radical Islam. When have you heard the UN talk about Islam at all, except in terms of Islamophobia and Muslims being victims of Israel or whoever else? It's all about the narrative that Islam is the victim class all around the world. And they never have spoken, never, about jihad or Islamic terrorism. And so you can't expect anything from from the UN or organizations like it.
It would be nice if our own state institutions recognize this first and recognize genocide
Exactly.
in Bangladesh or in Jammu and Kashmir. And then the next step is getting the world to pay attention.
Next question, please. Thank you, Ruchir. Yes, Nupur's statement was a quote only, but the guy painted it as derogatory, tried to instigate social trouble. Is there no law in India to book that guy? Sanjay ji?
Of course, there are plenty of laws. There's a section 115 of the IPC that says that anybody who incites this kind of a violence is to be punished for 7 years minimum. And if the offense of murder is committed, then he is to be punished for murder. That law is there. But as I said, that we have Article 25 as a secondary right and all kind of possibilities for bringing in laws, but we don't. So it's a problem of political will.
That's right. Next is Earth. Did Trump have clear idea about jihadi politics? That's why he was defeated by the help of radicals. Robert?
Trump was much more honest about jihad than Obama or Biden. And this got him a great deal of criticism. And he was not knowledgeable enough about jihad to be able to deal effectively with the criticism. And so there's no doubt that the Muslims in the United States, the Muslim Brotherhood organizations, they banded together with the other groups that wanted Trump out and helped get him out.
Thank you. Infinity and beyond. Should Hindus learn from Islamists when it comes to handling blasphemy? I didn't get this question. Sanjay ji, you can elaborate on that.
Well, even I didn't get the question. So I think
Good. Then we are in the same boat. Ruchir?
Let's move over.
Okay, let's move over. Anshul Saxena. Why does it happen that we aren't able to set narrative while they succeed? And another part, should we start looking for alternative at central government? Ruchir, your thought on this?
Why aren't we able to set the narrative? Is because
Yes.
we're not willing to set the narrative. We have to first start playing the game instead of just reacting. We don't have enough intelligence officers, don't have enough diplomats to do proactive narrative setting. It's all reactive, it's all responsive. As for an alternative at the central government, the current government has come to power, it has 303 seats in the Lok Sabha. Rather than trying to create an alternative, try to push it into coming out of its inertia and using the power at its hands. That's a rare opportunity to have this much power delivered to you, and they should make good on the mandate.
Thank you. Thank you. Next, Mahesh Narayan. Why does the BJP need to send people to TV debates? Nothing ever got solved via TV debates. They need to keep their mouths shut and work like Yogi ji. Sanjay ji, that's exactly in your lap. Go ahead. Because we are...
No, and surprisingly, you would be surprised. I don't
Yeah.
know whether Robert knows this, Ruchir would know this, that Yogi ji never shies away from the press.
Right.
And his clarity of mind is such that I have never seen him stumped for an answer. On the other hand, Modi never faces the press. So whether there is something in it that we can get out, I don't know. But you can't also be seen to be backing away or running away from TV debates. That would be suicidal.
That's right.
The only thing is that you need to train your people better. You need to train people.
Now, next question, Vijay Reddy. Thank you very much. Many ex-Muslims as atheists also attack Hindus as Hindutva. How do we educate them that Islamism is more dangerous? I would say all three of you must attempt this answer in 30 seconds flat.
It's not our duty to educate anyone. Take pride in your own beliefs and propagate them as you see fit. The ignorance of others is not your problem to cure. We're not one of those religions that is trying to save them from their ignorance. You're confident in what you believe, stand up for it. They'll respect you for that.
Thank you. Robert?
This is a matter of simple reality. There have been 40,000 jihad attacks around the world since 9/11. If you think that there's anything that's comparable to that threat, you're simply not looking at reality. And so when I see these ex-Muslims like Haris Sultan, is that his name? And Abdullah Samir, and they're always talking about Hindutva, I think, are you really an ex-Muslim? Or are you some kind of a stalking horse trying to confuse people? Because I don't see Hindutva terrorists out blowing things up and flying planes into buildings around the world. This is something that's not a threat to anyone versus something that's a threat to everyone in the entire world. It's insane to equate them.
Thank you. Sanjay ji, your last word?
I have a very simple solution to this. Make fun of Shashi Tharoor as much as you can, and the problem gets solved.
All right. Any more questions? Thank you all viewers. Please like, subscribe, Jaipur Dialogue, press the bell icon and Jaipur Dialogue USA and support us. Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Ruchir, Sanjay ji, and myself on our behalf and on behalf of all viewers of Jaipur Dialogue. Let truth prevail, as I say, Satyamev Jayate. Thank you.
We answered 50 questions today.
Yes, longest, and this is the longest time-wise that we have stayed awake in India, particularly Sanjay ji. So. Thank you all the Jaipur Dialogue staff and people for supporting. Great. Sure.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Ruchir.
Robert. Ruchir.
Thanks, everyone.